Hi, I'm Will.
And I'm Luke.
And this is Will and Luke Discuss,
a vodcast
and podcast
where we discuss content related to psychology,
personal growth,
self-development,
and well-being. This episode, we're discussing
The Art of Living, the classical manual on virtue, happiness, and effectiveness. So this is an interpretation of Epictetus's work by Sharon Lebell. Hello, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Really excited to do this one with you. It's been a few weeks, and it's kind of one of those books where it's not kind of like particularly like academic, but it's one of those ones that's just full of good life advice, and I think I've taken quite a lot from it. And I think particularly in a number of like framings in regards to kind of like what's in your control, what isn't, kind of seeing things for what they are, how to live by your own ideals, how to speak your mind and live with virtue and ethically and all those sorts of things. I think it's kind of one of those nice ones we like to inject once in a while, just to kind of remind us and just hit us with some bangers and some good quotes, just to kind of remind yourself of the good life and how to live it. And I guess this one's a really interesting one. I'm kind of made a few notes here, but I think it's all kind of around how to live the good life. And he was a stoic philosopher, so kind of the same ilk as the Marcus Aurelius book we covered a while back. I'm not sure if there's any kind of history you want to quickly cover, and then I'll maybe talk about the
let's give a bit of context then.
Get stuck in.
Yeah, so Epictetus. He was a Roman slave. He was shown to be quite bright and eventually a teacher that freed him from slavery. And then he taught his philosophy, but the emperor at the time was sort of intimidated by the philosophers of the day, spreading words of virtue and thinking for yourself and that sort of thing. So he was banished and to some remote part of Greece, where he spent the rest of his life living in a hut and teaching philosophy. And he didn't write anything down. So everything we have of him was notes of his lectures written by a student of his, which were originally, he wrote a lot of notes, originally compiled into 8 books, 4 of which were lost. And then I think some of them were sort of compiled into this manual, which was called the Enchiridion, which is probably like his most, if anyone's come across Epictetus, that's how they'll know him. And so Sharon Lebell talks about all this in this book. And what she's done is basically taken his discourses, which are the 4 books left of what a student wrote of his lectures, and this Enchiridion, which is this small diluted version of these discourses for like, daily reading, I suppose, like little nuggets of daily advice. And she's taken both of those and has made it much more accessible to the modern audience, given a bit of a description like I've just given you of where Epictetus is from. And that's what we're looking at.
Nice. I think one of the key beliefs that he had was that the role of philosophy is to help ordinary people meet the everyday challenge of daily life. And I guess at that point in time, there's like a lot of loss and grief, and obviously different times is writing in, but I think it certainly applies today, kind of how we can deal with things around, like disappointment, unfortunate life events, things not going our way, kind of just everyday challenges, and how we can frame those in our mind. And I think he frames, I guess what I've written down here is, what he says, the good life centers on mastering your desires, performing your duties, and learning to think clearly about yourself and your relations with the larger community of humanity.
Nice.
So I guess that's a kind of a common misinterpretation of like Stoic people, is that they might like keep to themselves, or they kind of don't kind of interact with the wider community. But what he's saying is like, you have a duty as like a citizen or a person of the state to kind of engage meaningfully with the people around you. And I guess it's kind of worth reminding that. He says, he talks about this being like, it's about kind of gaining a path to, happiness, tranquility, fulfillment, no matter what circumstances life throws at you.
And I think I like how he has a lot of credence to stand on with that, because he was like born into slavery and then was exiled from his country. So like, I know I enjoyed Marcus Aurelius, but like knowing that, he was in politics and became an emperor, it puts him on a different pedestal, doesn't it? But knowing that this guy was just some slave that then got exiled and lived out the rest of his life in a hut, it gives him a bit more like
He had some punches to roll with.
So to say, you know, take adversity as it comes, like you can really believe him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the bit I liked, I guess, kind of like finish off our intro framing, you know, because he says what matters is the sort of person you are becoming and the sort of life you are living. So it's not necessarily that there's these kind of like set ideals that we must hit, therefore we're a good person. It's kind of more of a process of becoming who you are, and process of kind of like living out your, your kind of your innermost, living out, you know, the best version of yourself and working towards that, like morally. And I think something that kind of linked to another book was around like the search for the secure base. Kind of just made me think about that as like, it's about finding like a secure base within yourself in which you can kind of face the world head on, kind of not let things kind of like sink in or affect you too greatly, and just kind of continually having a degree of perspective on day-to-day challenges and interactions. And I think that's something that I quite like these are little nuggets of wisdom that you can kind of hold with you and use to reframe difficult situations or difficult interactions, or to kind of keep in mind when maybe your inner desires are, you know, taking over negatively, or you're kind of prioritizing the wrong things in life. If you've kind of lost direction in that, like this is a good reminder, and kind of knowing that we're a work in progress and we are growing people and we're not perfect, but there's something to aim for here, I guess, in a way. Well, aim for in the sense of like aim for growth, not aim for here in a sense.
I like that. And that I suppose the way I hear that is, in this case, the secure base is sort of like the philosophy, which might be, you know, the values you're living by. So like making, focusing your energies on things that are in your control, and not recognizing when you're getting caught up in things that are out of your control, stuff like that, like virtue, like that's your secure base, not caring about how you might be misinterpreted or ingratiating yourself to people with higher status and all that and nonsense, and just trying to get money for the sake of money, all the stuff he like writes off. It's like, if you can find follow a philosophy for your own sake, then that's what you can sort of hold. That can be the flagpole you can hold on to, rather than getting dragged around by, I don't know, other influences, I suppose.
I think, based on kind of a couple of things you just said, they're a good place to start. I suppose I've tried to kind of section these slightly into some of the key learnings and key themes. And I suppose the first one is, you know, I've titled it like what's in your control and what isn't. And I think that's quite a common theme throughout the book, you know, like knowing what we can control and what we can't. And kind of made me think a bit of the like circle of influence versus circle of in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you know, looking at what we can influence in our lives. And I think this certainly kind of like stuck in my mind as we're going through. And I suppose the first one, you know, is know what you can control and what you can't. It says we're in control of our opinions, our aspirations, our desires, and the things that repel us. Like they're subject to our influence. This is where we always have choice. But whereas it comes to, you know, other people's opinions, physical traits, our birthplace, our status, like these are all external things, and they should not be of our concern. And I think that's a really hard thing for people to grasp. I think, you know, like, because we're so, we're so tied up in, you know, kind of what people think of us and our appearance and how we come across to others. And we're very we can be, some people are very sensitive to other people's opinions or negativity. And I think it's a useful reminder. I'm sure we'll unpack it a bit more, but
I want to just describe the outline of the book, because it might make more sense to what we now talk about. Like what she does, she kind of gives a real short like background of his life, like we just talked about. And then she basically has like real similar to the meditations and even to Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. It's just like one, like a title with like, it might be a paragraph, it might be a page. Sometimes it's just like 2 lines, but just with like a nugget of like wisdom to swallow or to sort of meditate on. And then the next chapter is just like the next page. And there are like 50 of them. They're not necessarily related to each other in any logical sequence or anything like that. So it's really like just one nugget, the next nugget, the next. And so that's the kind of style of the book. And I think it follows the Enchiridion, which is that summary I mentioned that made of Epictetus's work. And then the second half of the book sort of explains, it's similar style, but the chapters are a little bit longer, and it explains kind of what his teachings of virtue and happiness were, based on those 4 books. So yeah, the book's basically in 2 halves, and that's how it's set out. And so what we're, I suppose, digging into is maybe a few of these, God, I don't know how many there are, like 50 odd like nuggets of wisdom that we usually go through.
I think, kind of in that kind of first theme I'm talking about, there's themes of, sticking to your own business, disregard what doesn't concern you. So, what belongs to others is their business and none of yours. We can use our freedom and efforts to goodwill and not finding fault in others. Events don't hurt us, but our views of them can. No one can hurt you. It is our choice to view something as painful or not. It is our judgment that provokes. These sorts of things. Talk about what's important and what isn't. Like, we crave things which we have no control and are not satisfied with the things in our control. Like he's saying, that's kind of one of the key issues that we have. And it says we need to kind of like hasten our training so we can think clearly and confidently. So like kind of whatever comes our way, we don't take it so personally.
There's a real, it's not said explicitly, but in that there's a real call to like in the moment mindfulness, isn't there? To catch yourself when you fall into these traps of really caring, I don't know what other people's opinions are and stuff like that. I suppose it's not said explicitly, but like it's this daily skill he's encouraging us to cultivate would necessitate that sort of self-awareness in the moment.
And a kind of that alongside a degree of wisdom to know, I guess, like mindful, but with the right wisdom behind it. Kind of like you're aware now of what is your problem and what is someone else's problem, what their emotions or your emotions. So it definitely ties in really nicely with mindfulness. I think I'm sure there'll be plenty of other things that kind of pop up in this conversation about that. But I think it's also I like in terms of like mindfulness. Potentially, like you talked about, seeing things for what they are. Like I guess mindfulness is kind of encourages us to think, or encourages us to kind of not try and like manipulate like thoughts and images and appearances in consciousness, but actually kind of to see them for what they are and allow them to come and go and to pass. And I guess what he's saying is that our expectations, our judgments, and our desires kind of cloud our ability to see things clearly. Yeah. So I guess he's encouraging us not to like allow those judgments and those like kind of those tense feelings of, I don't know, unworthiness or jealousy or anger to kind of get in the way of seeing things for what they are. And once we can see things for what they are, they're less likely to impact us because we won't take them as personally.
We ages ago, we did the podcast on nonviolent communication, and this theme was like the first sort of pillar of that, which was like learn to observe without judgment. So oftentimes we might say to someone, you weren't listening, or you don't give me space. and like that's a interpretation of someone's, like you're adding in your own judgment of what was happening there. Whereas to say, rather than you weren't listening to me, you might observe something like, when I was talking then, you were, looking at your watch and weren't, your gaze wasn't towards me. And I was left unsure whether you were hearing what I was saying or not. And I'd prefer it if you'd look at me when I speak. So there's like separating out what's like reality, what can you claim is certainly true that no one could dispute, and what's your own just projection just pouring out. And he really talks about that here too, the idea of like making sure you see the difference between those things. You're not just projecting your crap everywhere.
I was kind of saying like training yourself to do that as well, like training yourself to kind of not let those things cloud your judgment. It's really interesting. I think it's true that kind of the author of this book said at the beginning, like how much Epictetus underpins so much of kind of like modern day thinking and self-help. You kind of you hear a lot of what's it, Epicurean philosophy. Like that's what they would call it, wouldn't they? Like kind of underlies that. It's amazing what you see in like today's self-help literature and stuff that is kind of really informed by these teachings. I think that's what's like such a pleasure about this, is like these things a lot of the time sound so familiar to us, same as what we're talking about with don't sweat the small stuff. Like these are things we kind of know. We know we shouldn't like care too much what other people think of us, and we know we can't control what other people think. We've got no influence over their opinions or anything like that. But like to know this is wisdom from so long ago, like this is the stuff that the books we read from like 2000, like, you know, the books we've read that aren't from way back when, like, we're informed by that. It's really, it's quite a cool thing. It makes me, I know, it's like a bit of history here, isn't it? Really?
I liked studying this for that reason as well. There's like historical context to it, as well as just nuggets of wisdom. And I really like that point where he's trying to say that, and it translates so well to the modern day, that like philosophy isn't just for philosophers, it's for everyone. And philosophy, like, it's not just about thinking and reading, it's about application to your daily life and decision making. And even back then he was it's as if he was saying that, like, there were lots of people calling themselves philosophers around him who were just academics. And obviously now, like, you think philosophy and what's your first thought? It's like a university or something. And it's like, well, that's completely missing the point of why studying philosophy. If philosophy is the love of wisdom, it's about how do you actually apply the stuff that changes your behavior and your lifestyle.
I think it's a call as well to, you know, self-responsibility as well, isn't it? That's quite like a common theme. Like what the first quote on the first page of this is, you know, one of his quotes saying, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to. And like, I think that's a really common, you know, says like implant in yourself the ideals you ought to cherish. Like wisdom is revealed through action, not talk. You know, it says hold to your true aspirations no matter what is going on around yourself. Conduct yourself with dignity when alone or when around others. You know, true self-mastery is the aim. Clearly define the person you want to be. I love it. He goes, it's time to stop being vague. Precisely describe the demeanor you want to adopt so that it may preserve it in yourself or when you're with others.
And so there's a real nice,
there's such strong language, you know. It's like, just pull your head in, decide who you want to be and live by it, but it's also kind of, you know, proceed gently with that as well. This is kind of a nice balance. Well,
there's a nice balance there between, I suppose, like critical thought, which is the philosophizing, and then actually putting that to action, right? But it's like, think, actually consider clearly who you want to be, because, you know, you're going to be born under lots of familial and societal influences and the people around you. So like decide what you want and then chip away at that. It won't be easy, but like hold, I suppose it's that difference between having the compass and having that ideal. And it doesn't mean you're going to get there or just be a paragon of virtue or whatever, but like chip closer towards it. And each day, like, that should be like your top priority in life, basically. That's his position by the sounds of it.
It's it's not, he's kind of also saying, you know, around how we develop ourselves in relationship to others as well. So I think he's very as much as it's kind of around like self-responsibility and not kind of getting too swept up in the opinions of others. He's also saying like how we reveal ourselves is through our interactions with our family, friends, the wider community. I think it's a really like relational perspective to living, is that like we don't exist as, you know, single entities. Like we're brothers, we're sisters, we're workers, we're family members, we're partners, you know. And I think that's really important, you know, like, and he says like make a habit of considering the roles in your life and your fundamental relations. He says like, you know, he goes a bit deeper and says, I'm not an isolated entity, but I'm a unique, irreplaceable part of the cosmos. When we are focused on our own purpose and seek harmony with nature itself, let others behave as they will. Like, so I guess it's as much as it's about, self-responsibility. It's about kind of like understanding your role within the world. And I think that's what he's talking about with duties as well, isn't it? It's like you have a duty as a citizen to kind of bring your best. But guess back to my point, I really like that relational perspective and how we, through our interactions with others, we learn who we are. And I suppose if we conduct ourselves with like, I guess, kind of like dignity and like in our own ideals, we can expect to see ourselves more clearly in the way people interact with us, potentially. Would be my thought. Yeah.
There are some I won't say contradictions, but like there's this balancing act between what you're just saying there, where he's kind of making the point, well, you're born into the circumstances you're born into, so don't pretend you're not, and like utilize everything you have around you. Like if you have a family, like be the best member of that family you can be. Like don't waste your time wishing you had a different family because they're the family you got, kind of thing. On the other hand, like you say, he's also talking about autonomy and personal responsibility, and in another
I was thinking that as I was saying that
chapter he talks about like don't surround yourself with people who just like talk nonsense, because you will be kind of
I love that one as well.
You kind of get infected by, not infected, that's too strong a word, but like we're obviously we're social beings, and we're obviously heavily influenced by the behaviors, the values of the people around us. So he was like, choose who you spend your time with quite carefully. There's a real balance there. I suppose it is that thing about what's in your control and what isn't. And on the one hand, the relationships you find yourself around, like be the best person you can in that role and in that relationship, but also where you can influence who's around you, surround yourself with people who are going to help you rather than hinder you.
Exactly. I'd love to. This is a perfect segue onto one of the sections I had, which was around kind of like other people's impact on you. So I might kind of read the quote, and then just kind of, if you've got anything else to add, let me know. There's like three main ones that I'd love to talk about. So one of them is don't defend your reputation or intentions. So it says, don't be afraid of verbal abuse or criticism. Let the quality of my deeds speak on my behalf. We can't control the impressions others have of us and the effort. So only or their efforts to like debase our character. So
so that, I mean, one of the first lines in the book is something about I forget the phrasing, but it's basically like, first things first, like don't have any undue pride. Be okay with not knowing things and the risk of looking ignorant as you're learning from the beginning. And it's all stuff. It's not in this language, but it's all stuff about like dropping your ego, basically, isn't it? Like
growth mindset as well.
Growth mindset as well. Yeah. But it's like, don't pretend you know things you don't. Don't try and make yourself like look better or ignore vital truths so you come across a certain way, or spend your time defending yourself, defending your ego against things that allow your demeanor and behavior to speak for you, rather than like I don't know, defending yourself against insults or something like that. The second one is sorry mate, like
that's good.
How many times on like Match of the Day do people be like, just let the football do the talking? It just reminded me of that.
So good. All right, next one I enjoyed was speak only with good purpose. So it says, there is moral power in our words. Think before you speak. Breezy self-disclosure disrespects yourself, and so many people feel compelled to give voice to any passing feelings, thought, or impression they have. They randomly dump the contents of their minds without regards for the consequences. Unchecked speech is like a vehicle lurching out of control and destined for a ditch. Be aware that common babbling that passes for worthwhile discussion has a corrosive effect on your higher purpose. I loved it. I think probably the way I said it was a little bit more brazen than he wrote it. But like common babbling. I love it. Yeah. So I guess it kind of. So that's maybe I don't know if you had a comment actually. Yeah. Any thoughts on that, or
I suppose, what's he talking about? Like engaging in small talk in a way that.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I was like, small talk. Yeah.
There's also like, it wasn't in that quote, but it was around the same theme. He talked about like, don't talk about meaningful things that are really important to you in a just sort of off the cuff way. yes.
Yeah. That's in there as well. Yeah.
So it's all kind of one and the same, isn't it? Don't put too much like emphasis and credence on triviality, and don't just like offhand stuff that's actually important to you. I suppose it's the kind of saying that what you talk about and the way you talk will affect the way you think and how you behave and the things you value. So yeah, check your speech. It's one of the eightfold path of Buddhism as well, is the similar sort of thing about the right speech.
Be precise in your speech as well. One of the 12
JP.
further rules for life. So another one here. I'm kind of enjoying just going through these. I think quite interesting. Avoid adopting other people's negative views. Other people's views and troubles can be contagious. Don't sabotage yourself by adopting negative, unproductive attitudes through associations with others. Treasure your mind and don't give it to others easily. Remember to discriminate between events themselves and your interpretations of them.
So a real similar thing that the company you kind of habitually keep can really ending up having an effect on how you think.
Well, it's true. I think it's something maybe I've kind of realized with age and kind of, I guess, being a bit more kind of guarded with my time and energy. And I guess kind of the inputs you have in your life, like you kind of eventually start to realize that you want to kind of be having certain types of conversations or certain types of hangouts, or you want to spend your time in certain ways. And you realize that the company you do keep can eventually have an influence on your, kind of on where life ends up for you, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I guess if you're surrounded by quite negative people, have you ever been in a situation where just everyone's negative or someone's negative too quickly in the conversation, people bond over that or something? It's if someone starts complaining that the train's late next to me, I just won't buy into it. I just don't, I think it's very common in England, isn't it? We can bond over negative views.
Yeah.
I think it's important to sort of, I guess, have your own mind in that situation. When someone's it's a bit wet and cold today, and it's a lot easier to be it's not the best weather. Whereas if you're actually, it was quite pleasant this morning, it's just a bit overcast the last 5 minutes.
Mate, that literally it's been really sunny the last few days. And last night I was going over this book again and making sure I had it in my mind. And I woke up and Natalie was like, it's gone a bit grey and overcast, hasn't it, this morning? And I was like, yeah, but it was really nice out. I went for a walk around the pond, and the mist was nice over the water. It was quite nice. The weather's not in my control anyway.
You just didn't buy into it at all.
I'm very grateful for this morning. And then I might have even gone as far as saying adapt your desires to the way the world is rather than the way you want the world to be.
Oh, it's so funny.
She knows I've been reading the book.
Reads one book, starts quite. Cool. And the final one from this, if you're happy for me to carry on. So it's be careful of the company you keep. So a bit of a lead on from what we were saying, but he's saying be selective. These people can have an effect on your destiny. Keep company that uplifts you, whose presence calls forth your best. But remember, moral influence is a two-way street. So I guess kind of understanding the role you have on other people. If you're negative towards other people, it can have an impact on them too.
So on that point, so even this interpretation we're reading, I think was written in the early 90s. And I think to modernize it even more, you could transcend what we're talking about now to media as well. So be careful of the media you consistently consume, because that will also have a similar effect. I've noticed recently some of the sort of more niche news outlets I consume. I do it because I generally agree with the points they're making, but more recently, I've noticed the way they make the points can sometimes be a bit sarcastic and put downy. And it's actually, do I want to listen to people speaking this way? I don't know.
It's interesting. It's good thinking about kind of links a little bit to what Tim Ferriss said in 4 Hour Workweek around was it a low information diet?
Yeah,
it might have been Cal Newport in Digital Minimalism as well, kind of making a similar point about thinking about what are the inputs you're having. Are you listening to hyper negative news or sarcastic news or news that isn't just kind of being objective? or, what kind of social media do you consume? Are you just looking at stuff that's just complete bollocks about like things that don't interest you, or just like unnecessary negative or shallow, or like asking yourself that question, like what are the inputs going in? It's not necessarily like people, and especially now, like given that there's a lot more kind of what do you call it, like over the internet interactions. There's definitely a way. Like, like online interactions. Oh my god, online interactions
over the internet interactions. I prefer that one.
Okay, And it's an interesting thing to think about. I think about I don't know, just kind of like, especially when you go through different phases in your life as well. Like certain things you might kind of find funny, certain things you kind of find entertaining that no longer become that. And I suppose it's like you can keep yourself trapped in certain life stages by not kind of moving on from the environment and the inputs and the people and the information that kind of go in. I think that was a really interesting. So kind of to expand on, be careful the company you keep, be careful of
any inputs
going into your brain. Really interesting point there, mate. I like that.
And like,
cool.
We have to be so conscious of that now, like, because the default is just to let it all pour in. You have to consciously put up filters, don't you?
And it's kind of, I guess, going even further, being really like intentional with like the news outlet you go to, or where you get your news from, or
how often you consume it.
How often you consume
you need
it?
Like, it every day. Like,
no. I'm liking this. I'm liking this. This little diversion in this conversation. It's good. It's good. I guess final point on this. I found interesting. So it's like asking us to regularly ask yourself, like, how are your thoughts, words, and deeds affecting your friends, spouse, employer, like the people around you? Like, are you doing your part to contribute to their spiritual progress? Nice. With who you come into contact with? So it's like, it's your business to draw out the best in others, and I absolutely love that. Like, that's such a wonderful like intention and sentiment to share, isn't it? Like that your actions and words will bring out the best in other people. So I've noticed, like when I've gone through a phase in my life where I'm like unnecessarily negative or just kind of like projecting, and it kind of can drag other people down around you. Like you have a responsibility to kind of think about the words you're saying. It's not saying you're going to be perfect. It can't say you can't have a bad moment, but it's important to know, like over time, like your attitudes, your words, and your actions are going to really affect the people around you and like the relationships you have. And I think it's important to ask yourself that question, as much as it kind of sounds like a little bit of could have some contradiction, some of the stuff saying like, don't care about what other people think. I think it's important, like if there is a relationship that you have that has value and you care about, it's important to think about your side of the bargain and like what you bring to that. Because so often we're thinking about what other people do to us and how other people affect us, or you made me feel like this, or you did this to me. And it's kind of, well, actually, like, what's your role? Like you have a role to play in any situation, whether it be like good, bad, an argument. Like it's a really great question to ask.
So it's like the other side of the coin from recognizing if people's speech and thoughts and moods are contagious, and he's asking you to recognize that in your own life and be careful around how you who you spend time around and for how long. Then equally, like, recognize your own contagion on the people around you. And but if you talk about things being out of your control in a really like exasperated way, and that will be contagious for people. And if you like engage in gossip, then that you're spreading that around. So it makes sense to be careful of that. I wonder how that, so obviously there are times where like you are suffering mentally and you want like a shoulder to lean on or whatever. I wonder how that would fit with this idea of be careful about spreading your negative crap onto people.
Well, I guess it's like, it depends obviously like how compartmentalized that is, how it's framed, how it's kind of, saying like whether like you're blaming in that situation, maybe like if you're kind of like stuff is like who are you blaming, who you pointed the finger at, and like I suppose also who's listening and what kind of space they're offering in that situation. Are they offering a space for you to vent and just get things off your chest? They're like, I'm okay, I know you're not in your kind of a most calm, rational, emotionally clear mind, but just say what you need to say and get it off your chest. Like there's no.
Yeah. So I suppose it's about being conscious and clear about what you're doing. So rather than just, spewing stuff in the changing rooms or in your office, like you might ask someone for a bit of space.
Like what he said in that earlier rule, like be careful not to spew. Yeah. And I think it's good. It's like, I guess that there would always be a point with your suffering. Like there would always be a point in which like, oh, actually I kind of either need to like come up with a solution to this, or I can't continually burden the same person with this news, if you know what I mean, or this problem. Like at some point you need to self-regulate. I guess. I mean, it's obviously case by case, but I think it's. But that's
sort of implying if it's an ongoing habit that's ruminating on the same issue. But obviously that would be a slightly different circumstance.
Yeah, or if you're kind of even aware enough to see how your words and actions around that situation are affecting another person, if you've got like the awareness to notice that, then you might choose to speak to someone else about it, or sort of share the load a little bit rather than just like expecting one person to be able to kind of solve your problems, or one person to kind of hold your distress, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think it's just probably therefore it's probably a bit about being clear, isn't it? And being like, I recognize I'm quite frustrated today, and I would like someone to be able to vent a bit about this and for someone to hear me. Are you the person, and do you have the time and space to be that person for me right now? So rather than just going into it, you're actively perhaps requesting it. So at least it's more consensual than just dumping your crap on people.
Of course. Yeah. Nice. There's something I enjoyed in this, kind of fell under the section of like live by your own ideals that I made. It was just around the power of habit. I really liked this one because it's sort of I guess something I'm working on this year is kind of like, I guess like overthinking and I guess trying to like nip things in the bud a bit more, like nip negativity in the bud. Like if I kind of start having a bit of like a negative attitude towards something, or I kind of just start spiraling about something that I've kind of already processed and dealt with, but then it kind of comes up again. Like I'm trying to sort of not add fuel to the fire. And I think this particular part was really interesting. I thought it says like every habit and faculty, which I Googled, I can't believe I didn't know the word, which is like, a mental power of yours, is preserved and increased by its corresponding action. So it says, if we are angry, we increase our anger. We have increased the habit, add fuel to the fire. So it's saying like, don't feed the habit, give nothing else to help its increase. Eventually, if we're doing that, it will be overridden by a wiser response, which made me think a bit of like CBT, slightly like replacing like negative thoughts with more positive thoughts. I wonder if you could like speak to that side of things. But I suppose I liked the idea that it is us who adds fuel to like negative thinking, worries, overvalued ideas, like any kind of cognitive distortions we have around things like black and white thinking. We add to that, like all or nothing. Like we can really pile it on, and just like keep your head clear and like come up with another way to deal with this, and eventually like it will settle. Like, I think that was quite a nice lesson.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's I suppose it's a difference between one-off problems compared with like recognizing what are your habits of thoughts and feeling that follow you wherever you go. And those are
exactly, even describing it as a habit, describing it as a like a habit. Like I've never thought about it like that, or kind of maybe just stood out to me now, but like we don't often frame it like that, do we? Like there's habits of thinking. Sorry, carry on.
Well, it's the difference between is what I'm feeling, how related is it to the present circumstance, and how related is it to the crap I take everywhere with me? And I feel this way quite a lot, regardless of what circumstance I'm in. And like you point out, like, so Albert Ellis, who sort of founded the first cognitive therapy, was well into Stoicism and probably read a lot of Epictetus. So it's directly pulled from it. It's not even related. It's the same thing. It's the same principle. Like the way you think and interpret determines how you feel. So it's worth examining how you think and interpret situations, because if not, then you're sort of destined to carry that wherever you go and project negative stuff and then suffer for it if that's one of your habits. So yeah, and it's I suppose a lifelong practice, really.
Is there any correlations that you feel with this whole work with like acceptance and commitment therapy? Any kind of things you think there's links there?
Yeah, well, that is a CBT, so it all has the same bedrock, I suppose, in acceptance and commitment therapy. It has a lot of Buddhist influences, which is where I was saying at the start of the conversation about, in order to catch yourself in these habits in the first place, you need a certain amount of mindfulness in the moment to be able to even catch yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to be in that river of thought, and you might not realize either ever, or maybe when it's too late, the way it's carried you off. So ACT would focus more on that side of things, more on cultivating your practice of how to actually catch and pay attention to your inner life. And that before you even challenge it or know what to do with it, like being able to get to a point where you can just observe it in the moments where it's important to observe is probably the hardest challenge, they would say.
And then I guess like committing to valued action as part of that. Like this would be, kind of know who you want to be and live that way. Essentially, kind of work out your ideals, your values, what is a meaningful life to you, and commit to those ideals. Yeah,
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Well, this is full of that, isn't it? Yeah, it's like you said when I first said it, it's the other side of the coin. It's like, well, okay, I've caught myself, but where do I go now? And that's when you need that pillar of like the compass of ideals to pursue, recognizing, okay, is this in my control? Is it not? What my other values, what other virtues am I trying to cultivate? So you know what direction to go afterwards, I suppose.
It's I think it's interesting, like these I guess these sorts of books. I mean, I don't want to kind of throw it in with other ones, but ones where it's kind of like passing on wisdom. They kind of operate on different levels, don't they? There's kind of like the day-to-day stuff, like don't babble like rubbish all the time. But then there's also like the stuff around like your like higher ideals and like your place in society and all sorts of things. I like when books operate on that level. It's kind of like a mixture of kind of like levels, I suppose. Kind of what Tony Robbins would say that kind of in his life areas, and then in getting things done. Yeah. You've got your different
40,000 feet and
horizons of, importance and perspective and that sort of thing. It certainly feeds into most of the books we've read, I think. Yeah. But it's, I like that. I feel kind of I feel reminded of like important day-to-day actions, but also kind of like inspired to kind of remind myself of my values and kind of what's the bigger purpose of life and what really matters and what doesn't. And stoic ideas of like, in 10 years time, will this matter now? It fires up all sorts of ideas across different domains, I guess. So it both captures the bigger picture of like what's meaningful in life, but like how do I pull that right down to the on the ground, like having a conversation in this moment, like how does it apply now? And I suppose you need both. Cool. Is there I guess I feel like looking through it, I've kind of covered absolutely everything I wanted to speak to you about. I feel it's been really nice to kind of draw a lot of ties to other things, and I've kind of really enjoyed this chat. Is there anything kind of you wanted to cover before we kind of
so on my notes wrapping up? I've got like 3 or 4 quotes that I've highlighted in yellow. I obviously did that for a particular reason at the time, but maybe I can just read them through, and if we've covered them, we can nod at each other and if they inspire something. So let's see.
If I don't like them, I won't talk.
Things and people are not what we wish them to be, nor what they seem to be. They are what they are.
So that's kind of like a lot around like was it like amor fati, or like that love of fate? Like things will kind of want things to kind of appear as they are, right? Not as we
so that
we wish
theme
them to be.
of like
I think,
it came up in Marcus Aurelius too, right? That sort of recognizing reality for what it is, and that it abides by certain laws, and that we can really get lost in wishful thinking and hoping things will be ways in which they're not, and that can lead to suffering. Okay, next one. Many people who have progressively lowered their personal standards in an attempt to win social acceptance and life's comforts bitterly resent those of philosophical bent who refuse to compromise their spiritual ideals and who seek to better themselves. Never live your life in reaction to these diminished souls. Be compassionate towards them, and at the same time, hold to what you know is good.
I think it makes me think about kind of like, be careful what you strive for sometimes, like, and kind of keep your values and ideals in check. Like, I guess sometimes I think we're talking at the beginning of the year about kind of like goals for the year and that sort of thing. And I guess I noticed that some of my like achievements of last year started to feel a bit more, I'm not saying entirely, but like a little bit more material, maybe. I was like, kind of like got this thing, or I bought this thing and managed to do this, but it's kind of like my actual goals were more kind of around, I don't know, more like spiritual goals or like personality development goals and that sort of thing. It just kind of makes me like, that reminds me, like, check in with yourself about like what you're actually striving for and what's important, because you could easily get lost in kind of the whole possessions. And I guess what he would say a lot in this is kind of around like external things rather than internal, like wisdom and development and values, making sure you've got your priorities straight, essentially. And that so this was under the title of the pursuit of wisdom attracts critics. So the idea that if someone sees you, I suppose, acting in a way that perhaps is threatening, if they've not considered their values, and you're acting perhaps counter culturally, then there can be a tendency to want to pull that down. A real common example, it's somewhat, if you're trying not to, I don't know, drink or eat certain foods that are bad for you, and then someone just tries to convince you to do it because they want to do it as well. Like a real simple. So like recognize that that can be very attractive to get pulled into other people who want to drag you down to their level because they're threatened by you trying to, I suppose, live a more spiritual life. Nice. What are the other ones? Two? Yeah.
To know that you do not know, and how to be willing to admit that you do not know without sheepishly apologizing is real strength and sets the stage for learning and progress in any endeavor. Yeah.
Like that. We spoke about that earlier. I like that one. Yeah.
Beginner's mind stuff. So
growth mindset.
Yeah. Last one then. That's quite a big one. I think this was actually from Sharon rather than Epictetus.
Bringing it home with Shaz.
Many of us come to a point in our lives when we have the persistent feeling that we have somehow betrayed our younger, more vital, expansive self by giving into a life of enforced duty or repetitive, uncritical action. We feel caught, like we are violating our destinies, ignoring or even desecrating our own best natures and leaving our better selves behind. Our attention has become divided and fragmented, and from time to time we feel a summons to live in harmony with our nature, but we are at a loss for how to begin that journey home to ourselves, home to virtue. Stoic philosophy can reveal our better selves to us and lead us gently, by degrees, back to it.
Nice. Great to chat with you, mate. It's been a good one. Yeah, really enjoyed this one. It's one of those ones where you kind of don't know where it's going to go. Like you kind of keep a few quotes in there, and it's kind of been nice to sort of draw some links with other books and links between the two. And I feel, kind of the same sort of lightness I felt after "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff" and Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's
they
one
have
I'm really
the
glad
same,
you suggest. Yeah,
they have the same style, don't they? Where there's no overarching coherent structure, so that it's hard to frame a conversation around it because it's so. But yeah, I think that's the point, isn't it? It's like don't. I didn't feel I learnt anything new in terms of knowledge from this book, but each time I read a nugget, I felt a little bit inspired to live that way. And I think that's the point, isn't it? It's more of an experience than it is a like, here are some facts to learn.
Exactly. Yeah. Nice. That's a good way to describe an experience. I like that. Okay. So next week we'll be discussing Paul Gilbert's book, which I'll get you to briefly introduce, Luke.
It depends which one it was. Is it just the compassion focused therapy?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a little blue book from 2010 called Compassion Focused Therapy, and I think that's the one you're referencing. But
it'll be up on screen. So, yeah. So that's that'll be what we're doing in the next few weeks. So
cool.
Look forward to chatting to you about that one, mate. And you can tell us stories of the time you jammed with Paul Gilbert. So
could do, couldn't I?
All right, mate. I'll catch you next time.
Speak to you later.
All the best. Much love. See you, mate.